from Ohio. So I'm originally from the Cleveland area, a town called Hudson, and then did my undergrad at Bowling Green State University in Northwest Ohio. I did my undergrad in visual communications technology, but I did a lot of my extra coursework in technology education. So my original intent was to be a coordinator, technology coordinator for a school district. And so I did my undergrad, but I also took coursework in tech ed and I student taught. And then I decided to stay on and get my master's in career and technology education, and realized when I was in the master's degree that I enjoyed teaching college students. And so ended up going for my PhD in educational technology at the University of Toledo while I started my first job teaching at Bowling Green State in the program I did my undergrad in. While I was doing that, I did a bunch of other things. I was a rep for Apple for a while, for about 4.5 years. I also I did my own freelance in marketing and video production. And then I also started working for another company in food safety, where I was part of their marketing department. And they had me doing all kinds of things. I was designing packaging, I was shooting videos, I was taking photos, I was kind of doing all the above. And so, but as I finished my PhD, I knew that I wanted to get into higher ed permanently. I wanted something a little bit more, I would say, stable. And so ended up doing a national search for a tenure track position. And from there, about a little over 7 years ago, landed a position at IUPUI in the Purdue School of Engineering and Technology, specifically in computer graphics technology. So I've been in the program for 7 years and finished the tenure process in August.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So that's kind of like my journey leading up to IUPUI. When I arrived on scene, I started kind of, as any tenure track person would, I really started to explore just the different options available to me. And one of the things that came up was a fellowship in, I would say, innovation and creativity. The university has continually wanted to make innovation a central part of the culture of IUPUI. And a great example of that is we have what's called a Profiles of Undergraduate Learning, which is basically kind of a pillar, these pillars for undergraduate students. And so it's community contribution, it is innovation, problem solving, and communication. And so I really felt like, this is a kind of a good place for me to fit into. And so ended up getting that fellowship and started by developing what's called a summer bridge experience for incoming students in innovation and creativity. That was one class I taught for like 3 years. And then I expanded that into what we now call the Innovation Challenge. And so it's basically a 5-day innovation sprint where we have students basically think through one of 3 different problem spaces, and they have to innovate over 5 days. And this is in their first 5 days on campus. And so last year
is their first 5 days on campus?
Yes, it
wow,
is.
okay.
Yeah. So last year we had about 180 students go through the experience, and it was a lot of fun. So we did a big showcase at the end of the 5 days, and they showed off all their different ideas, and they had a great time. So I've been doing that and part of a working group of faculty led by our Dean of Undergraduate Education in Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And it's through that we've been putting together a minor in innovation. Obviously, we have the Innovation Challenge. And then last fall, we received a grant through Elevate Ventures here in Indianapolis. And basically it's the Elevate Nexus program or grant, and it awards funding to universities that basically can foster the culture of innovation on their campus, and obviously connect students with their programs as well. So we were awarded that grant, and from that we have since launched the Center for Student Innovation at IUPUI under what's called the Institute for Engaged Learning. And so our website actually launched last week. It's innovate.iupui.edu. So Yeah, it's been a busy year.
Very good. Well, congratulations on all of that. And
Thanks.
when we spoke a week or two ago, I was really impressed to hear about a new minor in innovation. Are there any other colleges or universities that offer, degrees or certification or minors in innovation like that?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely are out there, but they take all different types of forms. And so I would say, while I can't point to specific universities that are doing what we are trying to do, I can tell you what we are doing is unique in the sense
Hmm.
that it's much more holistic and integrated. So a lot of times what you'll see is you will see a minor or you'll see a major, entrepreneurship program in lots of different schools or colleges of business.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or you might even see a minor or something specific within a school of engineering. And so what we're doing is offering something that is unique because we have faculty that are spearheading this from across the campus. So we have faculty in Heron School of Art. We have faculty, obviously, in engineering and technology and informatics. And so we're trying to create a more holistic approach to problem solving. And so it's not just about starting a business. It's also about coming up with new ideas within an existing organization, or what we call intrapreneurship. And so we'll have students will have opportunities to take many different paths as they complete that minor.
You said a lot of things that really piqued my curiosity, but two in particular are the fact that you have groups from the School of Arts or to informatics. I think innovation really comes from the border cases when you have people with different backgrounds who really should have no business talking with each other about the same problem. But when they happen to be put in the same room together or on the same team, and then they have to bring their skills, intuition, and background to bear on a problem, you get, in my experience, that is a very fertile ground for innovation. So I really like that you have folks in different backgrounds. And I also like the phrase intrapreneurship, innovation within an organization. I know that a lot of large companies are actually anti-entrepreneurial. They don't want a big disruption. They're deeply invested in an industry, in capital, in people. And if some upstart comes up with this new disruptive technology or idea, they're in a bit of trouble. But at the same token, they want to leverage the creativity and innovation of their employees and staff. So I've heard this phrase intrapreneurship to refer to a way to get your staff, your corporate culture, your employees, your students, your professors to think like a startup, but within the walls of your mission and business. Is that your definition of intrapreneurship? And subsequent question, what's your definition of innovation?
Ooh, these are good questions. I would say yes. The definition of intrapreneurship, I'll just say it like this. Essentially what you're doing is you're able to stand on your own 2 feet and either take an existing problem and think about it from a new direction or a new angle. You're able to take existing solutions and mesh them together into creating something new. So at the end of the day, like you are creating something new or different, even out of existing items or from inside or from outside of the organization. And so, you're doing it to help an existing entity. You're maybe not necessarily going off on your own. And so I would say that's kind of the general definition of intrapreneurship. Innovation, it kind of goes off of that in the sense that what you're doing is you're thinking through multiple things that maybe already exist and how you can mesh them together into something new. You're thinking about how you can take an existing problem and an existing market and put it together to create some new entity or widget or whatever it might be. And so I think, there is the traditional view of innovation in that I have to go and create this whole new concept, idea, or product. And I think there's a myth specifically among our students that you do that in a vacuum, that, you sit in a room by yourself and you are coming up with this new amazing innovative idea when it's just not true. what you're doing is you're usually working with a team of people, or you've heard different ideas maybe from other people, and you're able to coalesce them together into something that is new, and and that by that definition, innovative.
Yeah, no, I ask, and I agree in general with that definition, but I ask because it's often a word that people throw around and they say we need more of it, and they're deeply invested in it, and it's part of their mission statement, but they never really explain what it means to be innovative. And I like that you blend it with problem solving and communication also, because I think any good innovator, like a good entrepreneur, needs to start with a problem first. So the fact that you've wrapped problem solving into this kind of 3-word mantra, I think is perfect. And the communication problem is a really interesting one to solve. I myself am a very bad collaborator. When I was in college, it was either, well, let me do all the work and here it is, or I'm on my own. So speak to me a little bit about why you think those 3 things, innovation, problem solving, and communication, belong in the same 3-word slogan or mission.
You're not going to get very far without working with other people, collaborating, and also being able to communicate your idea to others. I've seen it in my own experience. I've also seen it as I've talked to employers. I mean, great example. Within my discipline, we are starting a new concentration. We've started a new concentration in themed entertainment. And, talking with people at Disney, they're like, we are starved for people who can collaborate with other people and who can communicate. They walk into the room and they think they're Imagineering everything in their own head, and you can't do it. You just can't. And I've seen studies around it. And so, if you are that amazing that you can come up with the solution entirely on your own, understand the market that you're trying to sell your idea to, know how to monetize your idea if you choose to go that route, and be able to then sell that idea. I mean, you need to be hired by every single company on the planet, but I guarantee you that person doesn't exist.
And I tell you, if they do, the lifetime of their value is very short. And I'll explain what I mean by this. But first, I heard you use the phrase Imagineering. And I remember back in college 100 years ago, Disney was looking for people they called Imagineers. And I love that phrase. There's a Makerspace there's a fellow who has a blog in Pittsburgh or Philly, and he likes to use the phrase, never stop experimenting. So I like combining, imagination and engineering. Sounds like exploring and experimenting. So does Disney still have, is it like an apprenticeship or a residency, the Imagineer program? Or is it just what they call innovative engineering?
I mean, Disney still has the internship program. They also have a specific, I would say, kind of, it's like a contest of their own doing, where college students can submit concepts for basically a problem space that they come up with. And so they are doing those things, but I think more than ever, Disney recognizes, just as an example, that really to pull off what they pull off when they create something new, it takes 140 different ones. And so, it's not just one person that knows and understands the whole process. So if you're a student and you're like, oh, I want to go work for Disney, if you were able to get an internship, you're going into a very specific function, of a part of a project.
Yeah. You said 140 disciplines is what?
Don't quote me on it, but and they're seeing this too. I mean, Disney right now is pumping out a ton of stuff through Disney Plus and other places to try to get more people into the industry, but they recognize like they're tired of seeing graduates come in saying they think they know all that too.
One of the reasons I love to have conversations with people like you is that we can go down the bizarre rabbit hole I'm about to talk about. A couple of years ago, I embarrassingly, I wrote a chapter in a book on collaboration. And that's when I kind of sat down and really asked myself, what does collaboration mean? What does innovation mean? And it occurred to me that, we have units of measurement for length, for volume, for energy. I wish we had, and maybe it exists and I don't know it, a unit of measurement for knowledge. And that we could then say, okay, if I want to make this pen, it takes 100 units of knowledge. If I want to make this smartphone, it might take 10,000 units or 1,000,000. And I imagine you could probably identify a college credit hour as some kind of measure. But the reason I say this is that you can then ask yourself, as a student, as a lifelong learner, as an innovator, what is the rate that I can learn a skill? And if a product takes 100,000 knowledge units, and I can only learn 100 knowledge units in a year, that's going to take me 1,000 years to learn what's necessary to make that thing happen. And I also think that as a species, we've effectively plucked the low-hanging fruit of innovative technology. It's a broad statement to say, but the doorknob is pretty cool. The space shuttle is amazing. But the next innovation, it's not going to be a simple thing. It's going to stand on the shoulders of the previous things, and it's just going to mean we need to know more, which is why I think you can actually chart out on a graph that it's probably not possible for a human to make their way into their early 30s with enough knowledge to be able to bring value. And that curve is just going to get steeper, which is why it's more important, I think, to collaborate with other people. So that's a bizarre rabbit hole. I'll let you jump down it.
Well, I mean, because it's interesting, when you think of like the young startup, right? That's like a thing where, I'm in my mid 20s, I'm in my late 20s, I'm in my 30s, but yeah, they're not going off of years and years of failure and triumph that is allowing them to innovate their idea. And so I think that in some ways that's also kind of a misnomer in that, you get a young person who's like, yeah, I want to start my own company and I want to be the next, Elon Musk or whatever it is. Let's use any major example. And yet they're gonna need people around them that can provide them that previous knowledge. Because more than likely they're going to fail and they're going to fail multiple times. They're going to miss the market. They're going to miss their audience. Oftentimes it's interesting, even as I've worked with students and I've asked, they've got these really great ideas. And I'm like, have you talked to anybody else about this idea? Have you evaluated, have you evaluated this? Have you had anyone do user testing with it? And more than likely, a lot of them have not, right? So how can you know if you're not building off of any failure or any previous knowledge or any measurement from your audience as to whether what you're actually solving is a problem to be solved?
And I think the implication there is there value to solving that problem. And that's why I typically add the word value in the definition of innovation, because people can come up with crazy off-the-wall ideas that are clearly novel and interesting and technically challenging, but like you said, will someone pay for it? Does someone need it? And that's how I define this value. And I've been impressed with hackathons where things like wake up startup or startup weekends, where people have 54 hours from Friday to Sunday to band together in a team with people they've never met, come up with an idea, pitch it to judges, and come up with a business plan. And often they're actually tasked on Saturday with going out and trying to find people in bars and restaurants, on the street, in retail shops, and asking them, hey, do you think this is a good idea? So it takes a bit of guts to be able to walk up to a complete stranger and explain what you're doing and get at least a little market feedback in 1 hour. Who knows how valuable it is, but at least it demonstrates the need, and you can kind of cut your teeth on that process. And speaking of hackathons, tell us a little bit about JagStart. I know that kept you busy last Wednesday. So what is it? What's it like? Did you have fun?
Yeah, we had a great time. So yeah, JagStart is IUPUI's version of Shark Tank. That's the simplest way to put it. So, but it's not just the event itself. It is a series of workshops that kind of lead up to it. So what we're doing is we're taking students through a process, from early ideation all the way to making that final pitch, so that they can present the problem, the solution, and the market. And so it is early stage pitching is what they're doing. And so the JagStart program has been going on for a long time. It was originally started out of the Office for the Vice Chancellor for Research and has been run for years by Karen White in that office. And this past year, we've had the opportunity to manage and run that event. And so it's essentially been run out of the Innovation and Creativity Working Group that I mentioned earlier. And so what we did is we put together a 6-part workshop series. And so Barb Cotillo, who's in Kelley School of Business, Todd Saxton, who's in Kelley School of Business, Young Buk Hong, who's in Heron School of Art, and others, as well as Wes Crouch, who's one of our mentors, and we had other mentors involved too. We provided kind of a streamlined curriculum over a series of multiple weeks, where there was breaks in between there, but it was 6 workshops. And then also each student was assigned a mentor that it was their responsibility to work with that mentor to refine their idea, and then to eventually get to that place where they had a strong pitch that they could present in 3 to 5 minutes. And so they went through a practice session on April 22nd, and then on April 29th, we went live. And we did it through a Zoom webinar, and it was great. We had 7 finalists present, and we had 1 individual who is the finalist and who won the grand prize. But then we are actually doing audience voting at jagstart.iupui.edu now through May 8th. And so individuals can go on the website, see all 7 pitches, and then they can cast their vote. And so grand prize winner won $1,000, and the audience vote wins $500 and money was supplied through the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research. And then they also get into the Elevate Origins program. So
that's really fun. Briefly, what is the Elevate Origins program, and can you announce any of the types of businesses that were pitched? Or I don't want you to pick any favorites, but I'm curious what industries or what types of products they were, what student type studies the minors and majors were.
So in regards to first of all, the Elevate Origins program, it is a program put on by Elevate Ventures. It is essentially their version of JagStart to put it
And are they a local indie venture firm or?
So yes, Elevate Ventures is a local Indianapolis firm. They're on the north side of Indianapolis, about 3 minutes from my house actually. And they are the ones who provided us the grant in the fall. And so it is basically their program that they take you through to pitch in front of their investors.
Cool.
And so it really is that next level beyond JagStart.
Okay, so that's really, this is more than an academic exercise. This is really being driven by real world venture people. Interesting.
Yes. Yeah. If they get into Origins, I mean, it's a serious program at that point, right? So it is not just an educational or academic exercise. So in regards to the disciplines of the students, we had a good mix. We had one individual, Josh Kelly is in sports management. We had a couple students from human computer interaction, the master's degree program out of the School of Informatics. We had one student, Charles, he was in biomedical engineering in my school, engineering and technology. We had I'm blanking on the rest, but I knew we had others.
Well, and
But
I'll ask you for that link again, and we can promote that. So people can visit those pitches and see what people are thinking of. That's great.
Yeah. And then in terms of the ideas, we had some really interesting ones. I mean, we had one that was focused on collecting new types of data on basketball athletes, specifically in high schools, and utilizing that data to basically help coaches make decisions. Our grand prize winner came up with a new device that basically would sit by a computer, and it would provide different signals that would prompt the person who's sitting at their computer to get up and move around. And basically you could put together kind of an exercise program. We had another individual who came up with a wayfinding system for universities. And so we had another individual create a learning platform for high school students utilizing their mobile phone. And so they were in different places, right? So education and sports and athletics and health and wellness. And so, yeah, we were really pleased that we kind of had a diversity of ideas.
Yeah, really, really fun.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that, pardon me, at the 16 Tech Makerspace, we'll have tools, we'll help people learn how to use them, with the idea of people realizing their ideas, whether they're products, retail products, or new innovations, or web apps, or art projects. I'm always fascinated to see what people's passion projects are. And I'm curious, we talked a little bit about whether there's overlap among maybe students who graduate your project or your programs and want to stay in indie, want to stay in the tech or creative or innovative field, and whether there's a potential pipeline for your students either while they're still students or after they graduate to be part of our program too. I know a number of makerspaces where college students often make up some of the instructors or interns or help out in kind of part-time ways. And I believe IUPUI is also looking to have a makerspace or two on campus also. So I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about whether you see a value in that kind of connection. And I'd offline love to explore more of these opportunities too, but always glad to pick people's brains about value I might not perceive about students having access to a makerspace.
Yeah. I've really tried to think about this, Alex, in terms of phases. And so, really it's through our campus leadership has realized that these different types of innovative activities are taking place on the campus. And so, Jake Ladin and Jerry Today and other administrators who oversee this program, and basically, I'm beholden to, they have realized for a while that, the university has established different clubs on campus and different physical spaces on the campus. And so we have, Think It, Make It Lab in Heron School of Art. We have the Advanced Visualization Lab in UITS. We have Idea Garden, which is another space on campus. And then School of Engineering Technology is developing a makerspace right now, which I know you're aware of and have consulted a little bit on. And so in the new Innovation Hall that is going to be coming out right now. So, yeah. So, there's these different spaces that are happening on the campus, and there are different clubs that are also on the campus that help support student innovation. But everything has been decentralized. And so what is happening is we are trying to tell a cohesive story so that we can basically put a wayfinding sign in the ground and say to our students, okay, you have an idea, where can you go on the campus that will help you? So this has kind of been our phase one. In the phase two, and this is something I've realized, my colleagues have realized, and even those in the community have realized, is that how do we really take this to the next level with the community? How do we provide more mentors for our students that aren't just faculty, but are those in the community that have the knowledge and experience? And so And so we've begun to kind of explore this a little bit, as well as, you know, how do we provide them tools outside of even what IUPUI can offer? Because, you know, IUPUI is a great place, but we don't have everything. So, you know, 16 Tech is in our backyard. I mean, essentially, or we're in your backyard, however you want to call it. So, so I think it would make sense for us to think through, okay, how do we develop an apprenticeship program? How do we, you know, maybe have some students working in the space as an intern, or working with a community partner that is kind of an entrepreneur in residence, or, you know, basically, even if a student doesn't necessarily have their own innovation, how can they sit under the apprenticeship of someone who is? So they, you know, they have maybe interests in this area. Maybe they're more intrapreneurs. How do we put them underneath someone who has done some of this stuff before, you know, so that they can learn the ropes a little bit. So this is the kind of the next thing that I've begun to explore. Well, at the same time, we're just now starting to tell the cohesive story ourselves. So that's why we created the Innovate website, which launched last week, is because we're now able to tell one story for the campus.
Yeah, I think we chatted a little bit about this, and I think this is important. There are, of course, many departments have their own facilities. Architecture might have a great architecture studio.
Sure.
Engineering might have a great machine shop. The art school might have a great sculptural space. And something, a nexus or a website or a mobile app that just tells everyone what the available resources are, is a value. I would like to extend that even to the region, so that if there were a design company up the street that has an amazing 3D printer, or if there's a laser cutting company that can cut, you know, 3/4 inch steel that a small makerspace can't do, I'd love to make those services available to folks, as well as a Rolodex of either mentors or actual freelancers or service providers. So if you need someone to help you with a website or an IoT mobile app or 3D design or marketing, instead of, you know, asking your friends, which isn't a problem, but you sometimes have a small network, or relying on random serendipity if you Google someone, or look through the kind of, I'm dating myself by saying the yellow pages, but to put together, you know, it's probably 1,000, 2,000 people in Indianapolis who are the kind of movers and shakers, and whose hearts are also in the right place, who want to pay it forward. And it's probably not more than a year or two of making a lot of noise online, on Facebook, through events like JagStart, and say, hey, let's become part of this cohesive network. It may not have a single roof. It may be in this constellation of, you know, satellites, but at least it's united in one digital space. And as someone who is passionate about makerspaces, I feel a little bit sheepish sometimes when I say, actually, the tools really are secondary. It might be why you were attracted to a makerspace. It's kind of the highest flying flag, but the community around it, the culture of innovation, all of the things you don't realize are important to bring your idea to market, that is, in fact, I think, more of a value. And that can be, I don't want to say decentralized, because we're trying to centralize that, but like I said, it doesn't have to be in one brick and mortar.
Right. Well, and, you know, I think that things can and should be decentralized in regards to the tools, you know, and the resources, because you have to customize things depending on the discipline. You have to provide context around, you know, around certain spaces. And so I totally understand that. But yeah, how do we help people wayfind, right, and find these resources? And I like what you're saying about connecting to the larger community. The thing I've loved about Indianapolis, you know, as I've connected with people really over the past 5 years around innovation, even in my own course that I've taught, and now the innovation challenge is that, we are kind of a big little city, in the sense that lots of people know each other already, lots of people are connected, and people are willing to step in and help. People are willing to provide resources. The first year that I taught my summer bridge class in innovation, I probably had 12 or 13 guest speakers come in, because they're just willing to do it. And they're from different sectors. They're from engineering and tech. They're from um, health. I've had healthcare. I've had food innovation. And we're a small enough city that we have the ability to kind of pull these resources together. And so I agree with you. I don't think we're that far off in the city.
And I've seen the same in communities in different cities.
Yeah.
And I've wondered whether, and it gives me a lot of faith, not just about people in general, but about the mindset and passion of people who like to make things. I think they recognize how challenging it is, but how gratifying it is when they succeed. So there's an additional incentive to pay it forward and to vicariously share in other people's successes when they get that look that they realize they can make their idea happen. I've also wondered, to your point about no space can have all the tools in the world you want. So of course you have to economize and pick. I've taken this to the extreme and said, well, hey, there are national and even international service companies like Shapeways or Fictive, where you can email your file and they'll mail you back your 3D printed parts. You don't even need the 3D printer here. So I thought, can you make a national or international maker community? But I think there is still, and I'll leave it to the sociologists and anthropologists, there's still a tribal pride in your city. It's where you spend 99% of your time. Everyone is enjoying the same weather or undergoing the same challenges. And so I think that city unit is probably a good one to form these decentralized maker communities around. And then maybe it makes sense to have an overarching network or app. I'd love to see a network of networks where if you have exhausted what your local regional community can provide, then expand your radius and see, okay, well, who else is available? And it'll be fascinating to me from an informatics point of view to be able to tease out whether you can correlate success metrics, number of products launched, number of companies launched, number of people who have taken classes on these things, and can you correlate them to the density or to a network of mentors or some secret sauce that has made perhaps a smaller community much more fruitful because of this kind of stuff. And I used to think that there was simply a threshold population number or a threshold density. If you look at San Francisco or Boston or New York, you see innovation coming from very dense places. But I think that's actually masking the serendipity of the real connections that are happening. So I bet you, and I've wondered about this, I thought there might be a critical mass of, say, 100 members to make a makerspace succeed. So you have to keep promoting and keep getting people to join. But I bet if you seed it, if you nucleate it early with a diverse group, one person who's good at coding, one person who's good at 3D design, one person who's good at market analysis or go-to-market strategies, someone who's good at woodworking and welding, I bet you can boost that curve faster. And this is stuff that I'll be fascinated to watch as the maker culture expands, as more and more regions come up. If there's a way to track, without being creepy, how these connections are forged and what kind of products are coming out from it, I bet we can tease out the recipe for a rapidly successful and fruitful maker culture.
Well, and I think that community could help in so many ways, because it's obviously the tools and it's the resources, but even I'm thinking of, going back to the students that I work with, it's the early stage ideation in terms of, okay, I have an idea. How do I actually vet this idea among a potential audience early on? When I am on a campus, I'm surrounded by people my own age, and I want to talk to, 55-year-old guys to understand whether they would use this, And so, I think that community could even help with that in some ways. So, obviously, like Amazon has tools and there's different tools out there, but students don't know how to access a lot of this stuff. So,
yeah, and I've also struggled with, for a while, I used to think, okay, let's say I run a makerspace or an innovation community and I want to teach classes. I thought if I just opened a conversation with the community, a Facebook page, an email address, and say, tell me what you want to learn. And that'll help me put the horse in front of the cart, and I'll offer the classes you want or the tools you want. But often people just don't know what they don't know. So at a certain point, yes, I think the market feedback is important, but at one point too, you just have to kind of trust your gut. And I think this is the tantalizing challenge of teaching entrepreneurship or innovation. Like there are certainly steps, but that secret is still, I think, still secret. and I love the famous stories, or Henry Ford, if he said if he asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. They wouldn't ask for the car. And Steve Jobs, no one was asking for the smartphone, but in his gut, he knew there was a demand for it. So how do you feel about balancing market feedback? Or do you take your gut, and once you have an intuition, then you try to validate that with the market?
And it's not even so much, showing people, here's a mouse, right? Showing people like, here's a mouse. What do you think of it? Don't ask that question. Ask the question of, okay, here's a computer. How do you intend to work with this computer? And so I think what ends up happening is, people who are coming up with these ideas, they take their idea and they put it before people. There's value in doing that and getting that sort of feedback. But if you, Steve Jobs knew that an iPhone would be valuable to people. He didn't go to people necessarily and say, here's a prototype iPhone. He never would have done that and say, here's feedback. I think he had an understanding of people wanted one device, because they were all, these devices were already out there. There already were there already were phones. There already were MP3 players. And in fact, initially Phil Schiller, I think it was Phil Schiller, saw the portable, this portable hard drive that became the iPod. And when he took it back to Steve Jobs and he says, I think we could use this to make our own MP3 player. He thought he didn't like the idea. And so I think what we have to do is we have to help people understand how to, almost the psychology of how do we identify the problems that people actually have. And before you can create your own widget and then show it to people and say, what do you think? That's kind of that first step. Because I think what happens a lot of times is people have a problem themselves, right? They have their own problem. They think this is a problem that's for everybody. Everybody has this problem. And so then they go through the work of actually creating it and prototyping it. And then they put it out there and they realize, oh, no, people don't really have that problem. So they got to ask questions early on. Even when we did the innovation challenge, we gave them a problem space and we said, okay, go interview one person each about this problem space, sustainability, at IUPUI, creating a better connection between IUPUI and the community of Indianapolis. This is just a problem space. Go and ask some people their thoughts on it. And then from there, identify the problem.
Yeah, I think, I agree 100%. And the reason being, like I said earlier, I think that an innovator, like an entrepreneur, needs to start with a problem. And what I'm also passionate about doing is evangelizing to everyone that they are a potential innovator, even if they don't think they are, just because there are people who are doing work. And this is why I often joke, where do innovations come from? you think of the inventor in the garage or a scientist or an engineer in the lab, but I think everyday problems, people, nurses, soldiers, mothers and fathers, they're the people who are encountering work and problems every day, but they may not necessarily identify that a problem is the root of an innovation. And what I'd love to do is maybe instead of having a chief innovation officer, maybe a city should have a chief problem officer, and just communicate to people, hey, the innovation will solve itself. I like to say, as an engineer, a problem well defined is a problem half solved. So if someone can come to me with an exquisitely detailed problem, that's gold. So really, we need a big funnel where people can toss their problems in, and then we can shuffle those out to engineers, coders, artists, and marketing people. Well, I'm keeping an eye on our Facebook page, and I'm not seeing any questions, but I'm seeing people liking the points you're making. So that's very sweet.
That's good. I'm not crazy.
No. And it's always validating too, when you come to common ground on something as squishy or gauzy or indistinct as innovation. And it gives me some hope that, in fact, there are recipes, steps, lessons you can learn. It's not just getting kicked off a cliff and go figure out how to build your wings on the way down.
Well, I think I love that you say, and I love the point that you make about people thinking innovation is squishy, because it can't. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of it's a loaded term, right? Just like entrepreneurship is a loaded term, but there are succinct processes that you can follow to solve problems, and so when I first started hearing about design thinking, I thought it was pretty squishy, but no, it is a specific process that you can go through to solve a problem, and it provides different tools for you to come up with concepts fairly quickly and then kick the tires on them. I mean, a couple of months ago, the Sports Innovation Institute on campus, which is one of the innovation institutes that that we have, is some of the students in tourism and hospitality and my themed attraction students innovated a new fan experience for the NCAA. And they've never heard of design thinking before. They never knew what an empathy map was before. Within 24 hours, they had some pretty amazing concepts, for fan experiences for the Final Four, which will be here in 2021.
In 30 seconds, what is an empathy map?
Ooh, empathy map. So it's a way to empathize with someone else. No, it's basically a way to articulate and categorize how an individual thinks, feels, and what they say and what they do. And so basically what you do is you create a persona of an individual, so that you then have kind of a fake or a straw person, that what you can then do is you can then come up with some insights about that person and then develop solutions to a problem for that individual. Because what happens is students will often, when they come up with an idea, will solve the problem for themselves, when it's no, you're not the one. It's not going to be the 22-year-old college students that's going to go to the fan experience. I mean, it will be, but there's going to be lots of other people as well. And so can we come up with some personas or some individuals that we can then utilize to solve the problem for the 8-year-old boy or the 50-year-old dad or whatever it is. So
I'm familiar with the use of the phrase persona to represent your ideal customer or the demographics of the person, but it didn't occur to me that you can derive who that is from something like an empathy map. I always thought it was kind of clever intuition, and one of my favorite maybe counterintuitive, it makes sense in retrospect, but it's counterintuitive up front. I have a friend who runs a digital marketing agency, and one of his customers wanted to reach people who might want to buy a fraction of an airplane, and that kind of people. So if you think about targeting on Facebook or on Google, you might think, okay, Facebook lets you choose demographics, estimated salary, things like that. So you could try to get your ads in front of these people. But he realized actually administrative assistants, the people who are booking travel for those folks, are actually a much better target market, a much better persona. And it wouldn't have occurred to me to market to that group in order to reach this other sector. So I think that could be a curious, an empathy map might have revealed something like that. Well, you've been hugely generous, giving us an hour. In the last couple of minutes, I'm curious, from your point of view and your perch, are there any resources that if someone were an innovator, a maker, whether they're on campus or whether they're at the 16 Tech Makerspace, and they had an idea, do you have a list of interesting people or businesses or resources you go to in Indy for anything from making a web app or mobile app to a woodworking project? I always like to pick people's brains and ask them how they perceive the indie maker culture from their perch.
You know, there is not one resource. There are different, you know, resources out there, right? So, you know, there's resources available through Launch Fishers and Launch Indie. There's resources available through, you know, there's Ruckus Makerspace, right? That we know of. Obviously, students can now go to innovate.iupui.edu, so I'll plug that one, right? So, so we have, you know, we have those, you know, and then beyond that, you know, it's really through, you know, honestly, LinkedIn, but there isn't really a one cohesive resource that's out there. There's also different venture communities. So, you know, we do have a rich history of, you know, venture capitalist firms, VC firms. You know, High Alpha is there. Obviously, Elevate Ventures is another example. We have different pitch competitions. So Powder Keg obviously is well known in the area, and so yeah, you know, I'm hoping that, you know, we can help be that, help create that culture that tells one story, not just for IUPUI, but for the city of Indianapolis.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's a great line to end on. I really appreciate it again, Chris. I'll go back through this video and I'll tease out all the recommendations and web links, and I'll follow up and push them in the comments here too. So thanks, you very much, and look forward to catch up with you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again.
Take care, Chris.
All right, bye.